Fabric Fridays are really designed to get people involved in working with Fabric. I did a live stream last Friday, went over great. Someone in the live stream mentioned, "Hey, you should do Fabric Fridays." We're like, "Brilliant idea. Let's do that." Oh, here we go. Hey, oh, welcome everyone to our Wednesday Lunch and Learn. Nellie, welcome to the show. How the heck are you doing today, Nellie?
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I'm doing great.
Oh,
It's still morning, I would say, on the West Coast.
okay.
But but yeah, no, I'm feeling great. Really happy to be here, Chris.
Well, now we'll get into it a little bit, but you had a real busy week. Are you okay? Have you recovered? Like
Yeah,
last week was wall to wall insanity. How are you feeling?
yeah, last week was nuts, but it was also like so much fun. Finally getting the word about Fabric out there. And it was a crazy week for the entire product team, I have to say. It was very intense, but it was we had so much fun. And there was also a long weekend here in the US with Memorial Weekend. So we actually had an extra day to recover. So I'm back, super excited to just keep talking about data science in Microsoft Fabric.
Oh, okay. Now I can't wait to get into that, but I think data is more than just bits and bytes. So I want to know a little bit more about you, Nellie. Can you give
Mhm.
us your background? Tell us, how did little girl Nellie grow up into data scientist Nellie? How did that occur?
All right, so sure, I'll give you that intro. Well, I actually grew up in Sweden, so hi
Really?
all out there. Hey, hey, I'm Swedish. And and actually, I'm actually I have to say, let's start with this. I'm not a data scientist. I'm actually not a data scientist. I'm a product manager, but I started off in computer science as a developer.
Okay.
I did like Java development. I've done the weirdest development languages. I'm sorry for saying weird, but it is kind of weird. I worked with SAP for many years. I actually did development in SAP as well. And
So
then,
I've got a
but
project that I could kind of use your help on. I'll take that offline though,
totally,
so that'd be great.
yeah, if you ever need ABAP programming, that's actually something I've done. And worked with across like multiple different industries. I worked at with large retailers, large banks, and sort of. So that's where I kind of like understood that I love working with customers
Mm.
and helping customers solve problems. So I actually started off that way, and then I moved to the US like 8 years ago or so. And I don't even remember these days. And started, joined Microsoft as a product manager, and that's where I actually joined the SQL Server team. So SQL Server is very near and dear to my heart. That's where I started my journey at Microsoft. And I started with machine learning services and R and Python in SQL Server, if you heard about that. And then,
I'm aware.
throughout the years, my expertise has been to build experiences for data professionals to be able to leverage ML and data science and R and Python. So that's kind of like where the journey started. And then gradually I moved to the Synapse team and started working on machine learning features for Synapse. And I just realized that, hey, we do need to bring in a lot more ML and data science into the analytics workflow. And that's kind of where it all started. So, and now we actually have Synapse data science in Microsoft Fabric. So this is a big milestone.
Oh, that's awesome. And I love to hear that you're from Sweden. And this is a live show. So we've got Greg, Stina, Microsoft Fabric UK, Kevin, and a whole bunch of other people. If you're in the chat, drop let us know where you're from so we can see what's going on there. I'm going to do my impersonation of Matthew Roach. We're going to
Oh,
ask, we got a couple rules that are being adopted here. We're going to steal these right from Matthew and Guy in the Cube. So rule one, please prefix any questions with a Q. Rule two, rule two, please don't repeat those questions. And then, rule three doesn't apply because I don't have any members. I don't do that yet. But someday we'll get there, right? Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're all here to dive into data science, and I know you have a ton to get into. I hear Adam said you talk too much. Is that the feedback
Yeah,
you heard? I heard?
yeah. Actually, yeah. I did a
What?
recording. I did a recording a few weeks ago. I hope that that recording does not air. It was not good. And yeah, and I just talked way too much. So I promise everyone today that I'm going to take it slow. I'm not going to talk too much, and I'm going to listen more than I talk or try to.
Well, we are happy to hear you talk, all right? You're not going to get that feedback from this show because we enjoy hearing from you. That's why we're all here. So, before we head over into Microsoft Fabric, though, this is a lunch and learn. So, grab our beverage of choice. We grab our pizza or our Hot Pocket or whatever it is you're eating today. We got our water. Okay, and then let's go grab a sip together before we dive into it. So.
Yes. All right. So should we get started?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay.
Right. So
OneLake,
there.
Microsoft Fabric. Tell us about this.
I mean, so I don't know, what other fabric topics have been covered so far. Maybe this is the first one, but
This is our
if you
first
haven't,
one.
oh, wow, you're starting with data. I feel very honored. But to give you a little brief concept, so Fabric, for those of you who haven't heard about Microsoft Fabric, is the next generation of analytics platform, where we're basically bringing in a lot of the Synapse capabilities, Azure Data Factory, if you're familiar with that, Data Factory, data integration capabilities, and also some new stuff. You see Data Activator, there's some stuff in preview, into basically the same platform as Power BI, and extending this platform in a way to become the next, the next of our analytics offerings. And at the heart of this is OneLake. That I'm sure that I think you're going to have an upcoming episode on that one, right, Chris? Like having Josh and team come in and talk about OneLake. But at the
Well,
heart of this,
since you're plugging it, I'll turn over to that. So join in. This is a special one. It's on Monday at 12:30. A little off cycle. Normally we're Wednesdays at noon. I still have Wednesday at noon, but we also have Monday at 12:30 doing Josh and Elizabeth Oldegg going deep on OneLake. So, all right, back to you.
Yes, exactly. So I'm not going to spend too much time on like introducing Fabric here, but if you have questions and they come up in the chat, and so like happy to try to answer as many as I can. But basically, you're seeing these boxes at the top there on top of OneLake is like, well, you're going to need data for analytics, and BI is a very important part of analytics, right? That's kind of where the refined data that's been ingested and transformed using these other workloads ultimately it's going to end up for business intelligence and analytics and insights, right? But there's a bunch of stuff happening before you get to that stage. And what Fabric does is it actually brings together all of these experiences, their different roles and personas that are working on that, and bringing them all together into a unified platform with a unified experience where everyone can work on top of the same secured and governed data that's sitting in OneLake. And OneLake is something that, as Chris said, you're going to hear more about. But the concept of this is really that you don't have to make copies of your data anymore. Everyone can work on top of the same kind of data, and there's just so many advantages of doing this. So that's what Fabric is about. A very brief introduction. But what we're going to focus on today is actually focus on data science and that data science box, the data science experiences that we're introducing, Synapse Data Science, I think is officially called, in Microsoft Fabric. Can
we hit a little bit on why it's so important to bring our data scientists into this OneLake environment? I mean, that's something we were talking about before, like having that disconnected experience with data scientists, data engineering, and Power BI has caused a lot of problems, right?
Great question, Chris, and absolutely. And I mean, like, one of the things that you kind of saw with all of those different workloads and experiences and boxes on top of OneLake is that there's so many people, so many different roles that need to come together to successfully deliver an analytics project. Let's say that you are solving a business, you're answering a business question, for example, which of my customers are going to churn in the coming month or so forth. Like these
Mm-hmm.
things require a lot of people to come together. And that's why I always say analytics is a team sport. And the nice thing about Fabric is that we're bringing together all these team players and say, hey, we're going to give you a well integrated experience where you can actually do all of these, perform all these steps that feed into each other to ultimately get into those business insights that you're going to get to, and hopefully do it in a very seamless way. But why should you care about data science as part of the analytics workflow? Well, number one is that Fabric just makes it so easy to be data centric. Thanks to one lake, you have your data stored there in standard open formats. All the different engines that you have, the serverless compute that's sitting on top of the data, is actually we're all storing the data in the same open format. Right now, we're standardizing on the Delta format. And this just makes it a lot easier to work on top of this open Delta Lake format. And it's for machine learning specifically, it's not only the fact that the data now doesn't have to be extracted, and this is actually quite common that for data science teams typically, they actually typically in many organizations still work on local machines. You have to extract the data out of its secure boundaries. You have to really figure out, say, hey, this is data that I need to copy out. You need to do your ML on it. You build your models, and then you need to figure out a way to get the model back there, or run the predictions and move the predictions back in. So this kind of detaching from the centralized governed data is a problem. Like it's a security problem. So getting rid of all of that and say, hey, data scientists, please come in to the same platform. You can now work in the same experiences. It has benefits from a data perspective, but also because we're standardizing on the open Delta format, it actually makes it a lot easier to reproduce your, because with ML, you need to be able to always reproduce your results. That's one of the things where if you need to explain, for example, why does this predictive model say yes to loan applications for this particular person, but not this one, right? There's a lot of auditing requirements too that need to come into this. And that's why reproducibility in machine learning is so important, and also explainability and so forth. But what the Delta format does is that you can actually leverage some of the features in Delta to specifically target a specific version of the data. And that also gives you that reproducibility. So that's one advantage of using Fabric, and the fact that we standardize on the Delta format. But
Hey, Nellie,
of
can I
course,
summarize that to make sure I understand this right? You're saying that if I'm using machine learning on top of one lake, where data is in a Delta Parquet format or Delta format, I can integrate that into my analytical workflow, and I can then, in the future, if someone comes along and is going through our books, we have clear traceability on that. Did I say that
exactly.
right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because you basically can take snapshots. Like I think one of the features in Delta is that you can leverage Delta time travel, which means that you can
Okay.
actually pinpoint a specific version of that table that you were using. For example, if you have a Delta table, you can actually say, hey, I want that specific snapshot of the data. And for ML, this is just gold, because this is many ML tools out there. You have to define a specific ML data set, and the reason you do that is that reproducibility. So that's one of the big advantages of the Delta format. Is actually it helps, like it's almost like it was designed for ML in a way too, right? So it's very very nice from that perspective. But then also because of the fact that you already are building your, like in a platform like Fabric, where you have your data engineering teams, you're preparing you have your data integration teams kind of building these pipelines to ingest data, and then you take that raw data, you transform it, and you stage it throughout the different stages. You're building out your data pipelines, and in many ways, like machine learning and is part of specifically for if you use predictive models, it's about enriching data, right? So you're basically saying that, okay, I have all this nice data, I can do analytics on it, I can do a lot of things, but now let me also enrich this data using predictive models, which is one way you can apply ML, not all ML, results in ML models, but this is what we're focusing on right now. So getting to be able to do that data enrichment as part of your data pipelines doesn't create that separation that first you have to do your data pipelines and then you have to go and build your ML pipelines. They're all like, hey, they're all pipelines for us, right? And you have ML activities and ML steps as part of your pipelines, right? So that's like at least our philosophy there, that we don't have to actively create this separation. There's really no reason for that for these type of things. I think we should try to integrate ML much more into analytics.
Wow. And let me, again, I think you had hit a big point there. Now we all work off the same pipelines and the same work. So the work my data engineers do to move data into my lake and across my bronze, silver, and gold data, we're all able to leverage that same data. So be it an analyst, be it a data scientist, we're all working on the same stuff. We're really cutting back on our rework. Is that right?
Exactly. You captured it really well there, Chris. That's exactly it. No need to make copies of the data for different purposes, basically. The data is there. And of course, you still need to govern access to the data. It's not like anyone can access anything in one lake, right? Absolutely not. But it's a great foundation to be able to say there's one copy of the data, and then you can control the access and who can work on these copies.
Which is so much better than having all the data scientists have their own copies on their own laptops, and no one knowing what they have access to. And no wonder you have to revalidate all this stuff. Like, oh, did you have the old Delta files or the new Delta files? Oh, well, there's your issue. Your stuff's the old stuff, right? That makes good sense.
That's a real problem, actually. That's a real problem in analytics today. Not I would say not only for data science, but in general, the fact that you kind of move data out, and hopefully Fabric is going to help a lot with that. So definitely. But then there's the data, which is at the heart of data science, right? And then there's also like the developer experiences, because ultimately, whether you're coding. Whether you're coding DAX, I know that I'm still getting to know Power BI. I'm still not as good as the tools and using Power BI as all of you are, but I'm also learning. But coming from like a developer perspective, say, hey, there's so many different types of developers in Fabric. You have SQL developers, you have Python, you have Spark developers, you have BI developers. Really making it a priority to be developer friendly is it's top of our list. And you're going to see this in Fabric starting even now in the public preview, where we are introducing our notebook code authoring experiences. But we actually took tons of feedback that we learned from our customers in Azure Synapse. And we apply that to make the Fabric notebook experiences so much more delightful and really easy to use. We have quick startup times on our compute, so you don't have to sit there and wait for minutes to just get started with something, just exploring or doing your POC or whatever it is. So these kind of out of the box experiences being developer friendly is also key. And one of the most important things I think is also that we're not assuming that every developer just wants to spend all their days in a browser developing, in a notebook. You can also use VS Code. So we're doubling down on our VS Code integration. You're going to see a lot of improvements of that coming in, and that's something that I know I've talked to a lot of data scientists and data engineers. They're really excited about this one. So developer friendly is also key, because ultimately data scientists, data engineers, they're all developers. Because whether or not you use low code experiences or just type code all day long, or whatever your preference is, you are developers. So.
Well, but I think it's important, especially when we're talking about a platform that's designed for both the pro dev as well as the citizen developer, to offer both kind of experiences, right? Like, what's the light way to enter, and then what's the way to like still do what you're doing, but take on that more like pro dev aspects once you mature to that point, right? Like, some developers will stay in that low code space for a long time. In fact, possibly their entire careers. But at any point in time, they can decide to pick up that mantle, light that torch, and venture down that pro dev tour path, right?
Yes, exactly. And like making this, I mean, like easy getting started experiences is not only about, quick startup times and uh, just well integrated experience. Is also about, what type of experiences. That's absolutely right. You're going to see, we do have some examples, like Data Wrangler is one of the tools that is, I think is a great example of a tool that actually targets both pro developers and newer developers. And I'll cover that in a bit. That is a low code tool, right? And our philosophy in general, you're going to see this a lot throughout, is that even if you get an experience that is guided and is low code, per definition, we always want to make sure that we generate that code for you in the end, because we know that ultimately the code is what's going to run in a Spark job, or the code is what's going to run as part of your pipeline. And you're going to need to have parameterize that code, and you're going to need ways to, and that's also a great way to learn, to let's say do something and then also see the code, right? So we
Right.
are all about low code. And actually, like talking to customers too, we did some surveys last year, I think, on this with customers, and we didn't get a lot of votes for no code. We actually got like most of our votes were just generally for low code, which, but what I mean is like where you have a guided experiences, but we also generate the code for you, so you can always learn from that.
Right.
Yes, but I don't want to spend too much time on this one. But like super.
We got a
quickly
lot to get into. You're spot
Yes,
on.
we have a lot of content, and I see that I'm already talking too much. Like, so
No such
Rich,
thing.
exactly right. Yeah. Should tell them, Chris. But rich ML tools. With this, I basically mean that ML tools includes things like support for ML flow. And I'm going to cover ML flow in a bit. I don't expect everyone to be super familiar with this. Honestly, not even the data science community is super familiar with ML flow. But it is a framework so that you can create models and experiments and track them. So we support that natively in Fabric. And we also offer scalable machine learning tools. So a lot of machine learning tools, honestly, like in the open source community, that's where you find most of the ML tools out there. And whether you're using Python or using R, in Fabric, you can install your own third-party libraries. So there's nothing stopping you from installing libraries and running them in our notebooks. So if you're using, for example, libraries like scikit-learn, if you're familiar with those, like which is one of the most popular libraries, Python libraries for training, you can still use that. But we also offer our own open source scalable library called Synapse ML. And that's something that's built in that we own and maintain, and it's actually the richest library for machine learning on top of Spark that's out there, and we're super passionate about this. So you're going to see a lot more examples and samples on using Synapse ML in Fabric as well, and of course, rich ML tools. One of the things that I'm mostly excited about, actually, when it comes to like features in Fabric all up, is actually the direct lake mode for being able to serve data to BI reports. That is such a fantastic feature also for ML, and be able to serve predictions. So I count that as one of the key ML tools that we can leverage to operationalize, like getting our predictive insights into the hands of the end users, the business users. And throughout all of this,
Actually, could we quick hit on that? I saw a survey once that said over 99% of data science work is lost because it's trapped in notebooks, a place where business users can't get access to it. Not only does Fabric bring all of this stuff into an environment where business users can access and work with and consume, but this right there, that direct link, that means you can integrate your ML flows and reports and content and data directly into what users are seeing and are interacting with on the front end of apps and on the front end of analytics. And you can really start to radically shift from a sub 1% to like 100% of your stuff is being consumed. I mean, 100xing your productivity is amazing. Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Christian Wade and the team for Direct Lake. It's my absolute favorite feature, and also like it's absolutely right, and we can cover that more as we walk through. Like it is true that the number one reason why machine learning and data science projects never fully are successful is because of that last mile, which is not it's a big task to really get the insights and the results out of a predictive model into the hands of the end users. And there are different ways you can do this. I'm not saying that direct click is going to solve it for everything, but for scenarios where you can actually run your predictions in batches and serve them where that helps, direct click certainly is going to be super helpful. But then throughout all of this collaboration, the fact that we're now bringing in these experiences into the same platform, sitting on the same unified fabric, and you're going to see a lot more integration across these workloads, right? We're just kind of landing in the public preview. I'm super excited about the integration between data science and BI in particular, because there's so many collaboration patterns that we see where analysts and data scientists and business users are collaborating, and how much easier this is in Fabric is one of the things I'm really excited about talking about. So let's
completely agree.
Yes. All right. So I want to actually show you more, in the product, and we can talk about this more. And I hope that, nothing crashes, but this is more of an architectural overview to say, hey, when you think about data science in Microsoft Fabric, like how should you think about it? What are the different items that you would, need to kind of keep track on and work with? And what are the different tools, et cetera? So obviously, Fabric is, you're going to bring in data from various different sources and systems and virtualize data over different sources as well, whether it's on-prem, cloud data, you can stream data in. We talked about OneLake, right? So OneLake is kind of at the heart of all of this, where all of this data sits. So all your Delta files are basically going to sit in OneLake, but you're also going to be able to create lake houses, which are items that you can create in the workspaces. And a lake house is ultimately a place where you can create, for example, your databases, the Spark databases. And a lake house, by the way, also gets a SQL endpoint. So you can work with T-SQL if you're coming from a SQL background, and you can actually work on top of the same data with SQL. But what I'm focusing on here is not like Fabric all up. It's just that, hey, from a data science lens perspective, what are the items that you kind of are probably going to be working with the most in your workspace? And Lakehouse is certainly one of them, because Lakehouse is where you store your data. You see your files and you see your tables and all these things. And this may also be where your data engineering teams are serving the data to data science teams to say, hey, we already prepped the Lakehouse. Here's the gold Lakehouse. Why don't you go ahead and work on top of this? And we give you read access to it, for example. And that's where, data science teams would come in. They would, for example, have read access to this data and be able to start exploring it and work with it. Yes. Power BI dataset is another thing that I've added here, because that's, I would say, one of the things that uniquely in Fabric, this just makes this integration so much more seamless between BI and AI or data science, is the fact that you have in the same platform, you now have the Power BI data set sitting there. And we're doing some interesting investments here. Semantic link is a feature that I'm not going to cover too much today, but I think maybe, Chris, we can do an entire session on semantic link. Would love to talk about that one. But generally, it's about...
I'll send you some dates, because I really want to talk about how do we bring the diamond layer into this experience and into like data science work without crushing our reports and our back-end services. So I definitely want to have that conversation with you, Nellie.
Yes, we should totally do that. But I mean, but the point here is that you would work with notebooks. Like most likely that is the primary tool that data scientists will use in Fabric to do exploration, to development, and also operationalization using our notebooks. There's many ways that you can automate running notebooks, you can schedule them. But the point of this is that from the notebook, you can work with the data that's sitting in OneLake, and the Lakehouse and I would say Power BI datasets are two key data components that a data scientist can interact with. And for this one, semantic link that Chris just talked about is actually a tool where from the notebook itself, you can tap into the diamond layer, basically the semantic data model with all the measures and other logic that's defined on top of it. And then you can work on top of this and maybe join with other data that's sitting in Lakehouse and basically get that view of, how am I going to solve this problem that I need to solve using ML tools.
This is fantastic. We do have a question from chat, and we have a question that I think we're going to ask right when you go over to the demo. Just letting you know, queuing it up. Sandeep is asking, hey, can you, for those currently using Azure ML, Can you please compare and contrast what's in Fabric data science, and can you take a model from Azure ML and bring it into Fabric and vice versa? Can you mix and match? How's that work?
Yes, that's a great question. All right, so I can cover that now since we have Azure ML on this diagram too. I added it. So Azure ML is our machine learning service in Azure, right? It covers basically any type of ML scenario that you want to solve. You can do so in Azure ML. For Fabric, we're focusing specifically on machine learning in the context of the analytics workflow. So that's where, for example, right now, batch processing is such a key scenario, because typically you would want to process these predictions with batch and then feed them to BI reports, right? You also have other ways of serving models. You know, you may have scenarios where you're actually deploying your models into edge devices, right?
Mm.
And you may actually have ML scenarios where you're building AI models for autonomous cars and these systems. So Azure ML basically includes a lot of these scenarios and offers, you know, for example, if you want to even tune your large language models, you can do that in a platform like Azure ML. With Fabric, we're actually leveraging pieces of Azure ML to power, for example, our model and experiment tracking that I'll cover in a bit. And we are focusing specifically right now on the batch predictive scenarios, because that's so core to analytics. So I would say that what we enable you to do in Fabric is much closer to the data that you're managing for analytics purposes. So if you're already managing your data, ingesting your data, and working with your data in Fabric, and you want to serve that data in Fabric as part of, you know, for BI reports and so forth, then Fabric is the place where you should focus on data science. So start with data science. But then you may have other scenarios where you may actually want to say, hey, you know what? Some of my scenarios have batch, but I also have applications and they need to invoke ML models. And these ML models are sitting in containers in AKS in Azure, or sitting in endpoints that Azure Machine Learning is hosting. For some of those scenarios, that's where you can leverage Azure ML and leverage, for example, the Azure ML SDK from Fabric to be able to deploy that model that you, let's say, perhaps trained in Fabric to be able to deploy that. To answer Sandeep's questions on importing model, that's actually something we're going to be working on a lot more, this integration, so that you can seamlessly import models that you already trained in Azure ML, or maybe even in other platforms like Databricks and elsewhere, and say, you know what, I want to use that model that I trained over there. I'm going to leverage it and consume it in Fabric. We are still in the process of introducing some of these integrated experiences. So today, if you want to do that, you know, basically today you would need to retrain that model inside of Fabric, but that's not where we want to end up. We do want to make it easier for you to be able to import and integrate with other registries, and we are using the Azure ML model registry to power our own model registry in Fabric, and that actually opens up for a lot of nice integrated scenarios going forward. You may have heard about Azure ML registries, which is almost like a parent level registry where you can see all your models across your entire estate. And I think that is a very interesting integration point that at least, you know, I'm seeing as something that has huge potential. But would also love, you know, in the chat if people have other feedback around other types of integration patterns. So you'll see a lot more integration going forward.
Well, and I think it's also very safe to say that where we are with our data science work when it comes to Fabric is where we were with Power BI and analysis service, or SQL analysis services, like 5 or 6 years ago, right? They were the same engine, but there were two different deployments. There was the SaaS solution that was out in the Power BI service. You could deploy via Power BI desktop. They didn't have XMLA endpoints, so pro devs still did, you know, the other side. That's today, right? As we go forward, I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to see all of those things and features collapse into one place, and that one place is going to be Fabric, so that everyone is working on the same platform, everyone's using the same tools. It'll just be a process as we get there, as we walk together down that path. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say let's see, because we do listen to customer feedback a lot. For example, like we even get feedback today around like, hey, these model REST endpoints, like if I want to expose my model as a web service, can I do that from Fabric? And our answer right now is like, what, we listen to customer feedback. If that is a use case, if it's a blocker for a lot of use cases to not have that, we can certainly look at that. But again, like you're absolutely right in the fact that we do want to leverage the great technology and foundation that exists in Azure machine learning, and also provide integrated experiences where, if Fabric cannot solve the problem, you can leverage other Microsoft tools to do it in a seamless way. So I would say I wouldn't necessarily say that everything that's in Azure ML is going to be absorbed into Fabric. I don't really think that's the direction we're going into, because Azure ML is certainly going to exist as a standalone service. And if you're looking for that centralized ML platform, and then Azure ML is the place to go. But if you're actually like really focusing on analytics and doing data science and data enrichment for analytics, we want to do everything we can to make that super seamless, remove barriers, and so forth. That's our current focus, and we'll let customers guide us. So depending on
Fair
your
enough.
feedback, we're happy to listen. Yeah.
I'm calling a shot 5 years out. It's hard to do that,
Yeah.
Babe Ruth pointing to the stands is one thing when he's one pitch away from that. I'm saying 5 years away. But okay, let's keep going. I know you got a lot to show us.
Yes, let's keep going.
Yeah.
We talked about ML Flow. You're going to work with models and experiments. That's actually a completely new items, types of items that we're introducing in the Fabric platform. So models and experiments are items in your workspace. I'm going to show you that in a sec. Spark jobs is another type of item that I can see data scientists work with data engineers who want to take what the code now that's training these models or running the predictions and operationalize that. You can do that through Spark jobs, or even lightweight scheduling of the notebook itself. You can actually schedule a notebook, which is super convenient. And also something that we are working on is to make environments its own item as well. And by this I mean, in my world it's primarily software environments, but also some of the Spark settings, like cluster settings and these type of things. Being able to create one of those eventually, it's not there yet, but once that comes in, you're also going to, I can see data scientists also working a lot with that. And of course, reports. I think that Power BI is a fantastic tool for also data exploration. And I actually think that data science teams and data scientists in general should keep an open mind on leveraging Power BI a lot more. And the fact that we now have them in the same platform actually allows for these explorations to say, hey, you know what, let me actually use Power BI to do this data exploration. I really recommend trying out and try to expand your skill sets now that you have all of these tools in one platform.
I completely agree.
All right, so we are introducing ML Flow model and experiment tracking. We're going to go through that. I'm going to show you this in the workspace, and you're going to see experiments and models. But I do want to give everyone a brief intro, because I realize when I talk to customers and do these presentations, not a lot of people are super familiar with what is ML Flow, right? And what are these models and experiments really? So super brief intro into that. So ML Flow is a framework. You can think of it as a framework. It is an open source framework in a way to bring some structure into the way that you test and run these iterations of experiments, right? Because when you have a business problem to solve, like, which customers are going to churn next month, right? You're answering that. You maybe have a lot of customer data. You have sales data that you're working with. So as part of this, you're probably going to need to try out different combinations of parameters, different combinations of different algorithms. You basically are doing a bunch of trials. And instead of keeping track of these things in an Excel sheet that you could do, right? And it actually happens that, data scientists can actually track these things in Excel too. It just, ML Flow gives you that standard support and framework to be able to do this, not just on a piece of paper or something like that. You can actually do it in a well-supported enterprise-grade way. So MLflow has different components. You interact with MLflow typically through APIs, which means through code. There's Python APIs. I believe there's also APIs for R and other interfaces. But MLflow basically gives you these APIs, and from those APIs you can create experiments, which is an item. In the Fabric workspace, we're creating this as an item, so you can actually create this item. It means that you can endorse it. You will be able to share it once we add support for sharing. Certify it, etc. So it's actually a thing in your workspace. And an experiment in MLflow is also an object. It's an entity, and it has a bunch of parameters and metrics and so forth. And you're going to see when I show you that in a bit too, that runs are things that are like children of the experiment. So whenever you run an experiment and you create an empty experiment, it's primarily a container of things. So it's an empty container now, and now you can populate it with stuff, and you can do that through code. So you use MLflow APIs to populate this experiment. As you run your training code, you're basically creating these training runs. And each of the runs then becomes a way for you to be able to track, okay, in this iteration, I used these parameters and these values. In the next iteration, in my run two, I tweaked them a little bit, right? And now I want to see which one is the best performing one, which one is giving me the best ML model. That's why this is so useful. So if you just go ahead and create an experiment, again, you would need to put something in it for it to have content. It's going to be empty. And so that's part of the tracking server in MLflow. That's more of it, information for you to have.
But can oh my thing Thin has a question about One Lake and environments. I think I know the answer to this, but I want to validate with you. Can you create a feature branch when working on a notebook, but only have One Lake changes in one feature branch or environment? How does that work? Like if I have these different runs and I want these different runs to be separated out so I can test them, how's that? Can I do that?
Okay, so that's actually a great question because we are working on this as we speak. This is a design that we're actively actually investigating, like how to. So the Git support for Fabric is going to evolve in the coming months and leading up to GA. So you're going to see a lot more of that. But yes, our thinking there is that if you have a workspace and you're creating a branch, we are now still figuring out, how we're going to do the CI/CD for models and experiments, but also for data in general. So I would say stay tuned to see how that design is. But I would love it if the person who posted this question could actually propose to say, here's what I would love to see. This is like if you had a magic wand, what is the behavior that you would want for models and experiments when you're doing, for example, a branching and you're leveraging, for example, Git, and you want to work in your separate branch, we would love to hear what you would want to see. MLflow in general is basically giving you that version control of models and experiments. So this framework is already there. So we're not going to create a new one, right? But I think it's more around what you would want to see in your workspaces. But a great question, actually super top of mind, and I would love to connect with you offline.
So I just shared your Twitter and LinkedIn profile in the chat. So please hit Nellie up. Nellie is I was going to say the man, but that's not right. But yeah, Nellie's the Nellie when it comes to this stuff. So you got to get a hold of Nellie.
Yeah, please do reach out. And I know, I have PMs in my team who are actively working on this, would love to make the connection because we're actually just doing customer interviews about this specific topic. We want to make it super seamless. But again, models and experiments and MLflow is taking care of that versioning for you. Now, similarly, model is, again, you create a model, it's a container, and then you add versions. So for model, the children are versions. So keep this in mind because now we're going to dive into Fabric. And as we do that, you're going to be able to see, what this looks like. So,
and Nellie, we did have a previous question earlier. If someone is in Power BI and just coming into data science, is this a good place to start, or is there a different place that we should touch on later? You can.
Yeah, so I would say Fabric is actually a great place to start. And let me just go into the data. So I'm in Fabric right now. Let's go into the data science home page. And so when you land in Fabric and you can sign up for a trial, right? And you see I have a trial here too. And you basically switch. These experiences are changing a little bit. But I think currently you could go into this experience switcher, you switch to data science, for example. Then you see everything relevant for you. As someone who wants to engage and do data science, you want to learn, or maybe you're already a pro data scientist, you want to come in and just get something done. I would recommend for newer users to actually start off with our samples. So you can actually click on the samples here, and we're going to expand this a lot more. This is just the first set, and we're keep evolving these. But the idea of this is that you can actually go ahead and get started. And for example, you can click on one of these things like title, genre, classification. And this is an end-to-end notebook that's basically going to walk you through and create a new notebook for you in your workspace, where you can you can basically walk through all the steps and see how these things happen. And if you run all the cells in this notebook, it's going to create an ML model. And I actually pre-ran, I think, one of these notebooks, so I can show you what the ML model looks like. But you can see, for example, here that you can install third-party libraries. You can actually use pip install. A lot of customers ask for this in Synapse. I'm super excited. It's like as you're experimenting, you actually just do installs on the fly in your session. But there's also ways where you can persist these installations. You can go into the workspace settings and you can actually add the libraries there, and then they will always be there in your session when you start up. So, but this is a quick.
Really?
Yeah, so you can, there's a way to persist it because you may not want to do the pip install every time. But if you're just exploring it and experimenting, like if I'm solving a problem with ML, I probably want to try out like 10 different libraries before I decide on which ones, right? In that stage, I think the pip installs and conda installs are great for this. But again, this is a notebook. It has comments and things. If you're not used to authoring code, I would say like start off with like going through the comments, going through the notebook, and maybe run all the cells in the notebook. You just click run all here. And once you do that, you're going to see, for example, you see here, experiment name, text classification. I can actually run this now, but I'm nor guaranteed that it's going to be done by the time I actually need to attach a lakehouse. So what you can do here, that if you can attach a lakehouse too, I'm just, doing this super on the fly here to show you how things work. So if you have a lakehouse already, you can attach it. But if you don't have a lakehouse, you can just create a new one. So that's also another thing where I think that this is going to error out now because I didn't have a lakehouse. So you can just create a new one. You can give it a name and say, Nellie's test, like this, and you create it, and then it's going to sit here on the side. So the data that you want to work with, it's going to sit on here to the left in your notebook experience, which is also super convenient, because then if you want to upload files into your lakehouse, you can go into your lakehouse, you can upload them. And we're also going to add some experiences here eventually, I think it's coming, where you can actually work with a little bit of a local file system here next to your notebook. So you're not going to need necessarily to have a lakehouse always. I think that's where this is. This is maybe, I don't know if you're all going to have this. So I'm actually showing this in our internal environments here, but yeah, so this is where you can drag and drop files.
So everyone's under NDA now. So don't disclose.
No, I mean, I think it's fine. It's fine. I trust you guys, so it's good. No, but I mean, look, we've talked about this too. That this is.
I don't know if I trust everyone on YouTube, but here we are. So.
Here we are. Fine. But the idea of this is that you can walk through this notebook. It's actually going to create. So that's what the part I wanted to show you, is the part where you actually go and say, hey, I'm doing my model training here. Let me actually just start running all the cells here so that it keeps running. But you can see from the code here that I can use ML flow from the code. So remember, I showed you those boxes with models and experiments. So ML flow and the ML flow APIs are the way that you interact with models and experiments. So that's how you create them. Right now, we don't have a visual interface to create the models themselves. It may be something that's going to come. We're listening to you. If you want to see more of that, we're happy to listen. But the idea is that using ML flow, it's not that scary, honestly. You say, hey, ML flow set experiment. I want to work with this experiment. So now you're saying that you gave it an experiment name at the top. You're saying, I want to create this experiment if it doesn't exist. And if it exists, I want you to attach runs to this experiment. And then you start reading data from the lakehouse. You can explore the data in the lakehouse and all of that. You can do visualizations on top of it. And then the part that I wanted to show you specifically is that when you train your model, you can log the model with ML flow. So let me scroll down here. Actually, I should probably show you this notebook instead, because this is a pre-run notebook that I have. I think it's the same notebook. So you see here that I downloaded some data into the lakehouse. The data is actually sitting here in the lakehouse, and I'm loading that data into data frames, and I'm working with data frames because that's what we like to do, right? Data scientists work a lot with pandas data frames, and I'm going to visualize my data, explore my data, and Python, again, is a tool that is very common for data scientists to use from a notebook perspective. but you're going to see a lot more integration here as well with Power BI and visualization, so that, again, I said Power BI is so powerful for data exploration. We would love it to be able to provide you out-of-the-box experiences here too. So I want to share a little bit of a roadmap there. But then, so you create the model, and you ultimately, when you log the model, again, you use MLflow. And what you do is that you start a run. So you see here, for example, that we're starting an MLflow run, and then you log the model, and the model's now automatically going to be part of that run. So if I go back to my workspace here, let me go back to this workspace, and I go into one of these models. So for example, I'm going to go actually into the experiment, because first you create an experiment, and then from the runs, we can create a model from right here. So you see here that I have a lot of runs in this particular one, because I just ran the notebook multiple times with the same experiment name. So these experiments, don't freak out, they're going to get a random name, and it's actually super convenient. You see here, Sincere Plum is this run, for example. You can rename this. So you can actually just go ahead and rename this if you want to. So don't worry about that. But this is actually a great way, because you want unique names, right? Because you want to be able to remember to say, hey, Chris, can you go and check out like Sincere Plum? I shared this experiment with you. Can you please check the run and see what you think about the parameters and the metrics that I'm getting, right, as data science? And then, Chris would go in and he would check it out. Now, you have all these runs. So what are the things you want to do is you want to evaluate the runs, right? You want to know, like, hey, how are my runs doing? So for example, here, you can select a few of these runs. So let's select 4 of them, including Sincere Plum. And you can then start evaluating these runs, right? So you can go ahead and see, okay, I can compare them. So you can compare them in a table view. You can filter, but you can also compare them with charts. And this is an experience, again, that we are evolving a lot. We're getting a lot of feedback on this one. People want to be able to persist the charts and customize the charts here. And imagine if you could even open up and analyze all of this in a BI report, where you can completely slice and dice this data the way that you want to. Again, these are things that we're actively thinking about. If you have feedback on these things, let us know in the chat, tag me on Twitter, DM me, any way you can reach me, please do. We do want to work with you on learning more about this. But this is ultimately what an experiment allows you to do. It gives the data scientist a way to compare these type of runs.
Ooh, how about native integration with metrics? That would be fantastic. Huh?
Yes. Absolutely. And we are actually that's where we get into semantic link, and we are going to do a lot more around metrics layer integration and all of that. So that's coming. But I think we would probably need a full hour for that, Chris. Let me actually go. Let me go back to the experiment, because I wanted to show you something here. Let's go into the details. So you remember that slide again, right? I had the box with the experiment and I had the run. So that's what you're seeing here. Now, from a run, if you remember that particular slide, it had a little dotted line to create a model version. So I can actually take like, let's say, I can select this run, like Sincere Plum. I can say, I want to save the model from this run as an actual model in my workspace. And you can say, I want to create a new version, a completely new model. And we can call it, say, hey, Nellie's test model or something like that. Nellie's test model. So I can actually go ahead and create the model from here. And I can also do it from code again. So this is a UI gesture that allows you to actually create a model. And the model is something that you create once you actually, you look at all these runs and you say, hey, from one of the runs, I actually want to take that model version and I want to operationalize that model. So typically in a workspace, you probably have more runs and experiments than you have models, because models are the thing that you're going to operationalize, right? So that's the golden one that you chose. So if I go, I think that we kind of missed that, and there's some things that we need to do here. So from a model perspective now, I can click on this model. It's identical to the one that I just created, but here's a pre-created one that I had that has a version in it as well. You can see that this one actually has multiple versions in it.
Okay.
And when you create that model, then you get this model item in your workspace. And now this is the thing that you can apply. So what does it mean to apply a model? It means that you can actually invoke the model from code. So here's an experience. Now you can actually copy paste this code. And this is showing you how to apply this particular model. If you want to copy paste this into your notebook, you can do that. We also have a UI experience that allows you to, let's say, I don't know why that's grayed out right now. I think I'm going to ignore that for now. But we also have a wizard experience for this so that you can actually generate that notebook. So why is this important then? Well, this basically means that you can now go ahead and say, in this case, this is our end-to-end data science learning module that you can do. And this is probably the best example out there. It's even better than the samples that you saw. There's a prediction step, and that's what I wanted to dive into in this one. All of those samples also do the predictions. So you're going to be able to write the predictions back into, I'm sorry, I'm jumping back and forth, Chris. Let me know if it's hard to follow. But remember that the predictions can be written back to the lakehouse. And when we write the predictions back into the lakehouse, we can store them in a particular, we can save them and write them into the lakehouse in a V-order format, which basically gets them into that Parquet format that Power BI can read. So you see here that I have some predictive, I have some batch predictions. They are basically Parquet files. So I wrote them from this notebook too. It's a sample notebook. It's writing them into the lake. Here you can see that we're writing the predictions back into the lake. Now I have a similar notebook here that's doing the same thing. The difference here is that this one is writing it with the V order, so that here we actually are saving them into we have the predicted values in a table. And the nice thing about this is that in the workspace, when you write the V order files, you are now going to get an automatically generated Power BI data set in your workspace. So for example, you see here that I have a Nellie test, I have a SQL endpoint. I also have, in this case, a New York taxi, that's the one I want to show you, a data set. Now, what is this data set? This data set should be something that's familiar to a lot of folks maybe in the audience, is that it's a Power BI data set, and this is how I view it. So you can see here in the Power BI data set that I have here in my workspace now that it has the predicted table, and it has the column with my predictions. So I can actually now set my notebook to run on a regular basis. Where's my predicted column? There it is, predicted trip duration. So this is a different problem. It's predicting a value, but this one actually has everything set up end to end. So I wanted to show you this one. And this means that this particular data set, I can now go ahead and create a report on top of this data set, and that's this report that's right here. And it's now incorporating those predicted values. So you create the models and experiments, you write the predictions back into the lake house or in one lake that's sitting in one lake. And thanks to the direct lake mode, you can now take those predicted values and visualize them and show them and analyze them in your report. So it's kind of the full circle of that end-to-end workflow.
Wow, there it is. Nellie, I am, number one, I'm blown away at the capabilities here. I'm also blown away, at how we can take our data analytics in an environment that you build out and do everything in, and then get it to a place that, our business users could interact with it and gain insights from. This is fantastic. Thank you so very much for this. Plus, we have like a full 2 minute and a half left in the live stream. So, if we were going to go back and you're going to say, hey, there's one thing you would want people to do with Microsoft Fabric and the data science space, what would that one thing be?
Okay, that's a great question. I think that you should sign up for a trial because it's not going to cost you anything to sign up for a trial. And I actually think you should play around with this yourself, with these experiences. So for example, go into the data science home, try out some of these samples. Can we also post links, Chris? After this session, because I would love to post a few links where you can actually go ahead and get started with, I would say, the best full end-to-end use case that you should get started with besides the samples. If you want to have the steps to create the BI report and everything in one go, would be this data science end-to-end tutorial. And I'll post the link to where you can get started with that. And that's part of one of our, I would say that's basically the best learning path, to say, walk through this tutorial. It's going to walk you through every single step, including the creation of the reports, like getting everything into one lake, and try that out yourself. Like, do the model and experiment, the model training, and look at the experiments and all of these things, and get yourself familiar with these new types of items in the workspace. That's probably my best advice. So I'll post that link.
I already got that link for you. I had that one queued up. The end-to-end content is amazing. I also shared the Microsoft Learn, just getting to know what the data science stuff is and everything inside of Fabric. So hopefully people are, now they see the why and what are they going to do. And worst case scenario, they come back and watch this video a few times and to get them up to speed on what they might have missed out. So we are, though, at time, and we try to be very respectful for everyone's time. So first off, I want to thank everyone in the chat, everyone who's tuned in. Thank you guys so much for joining this weekly Lunch and Learn. Remember, we've got Monday, 12:30. We're going to be talking One Lake. Super excited about that. This Friday, we also have the very, very first Fabric Fridays with Kevin Arnold and I, 7:30 a.m. Central Time. We're going to be doing deep dives into Fabric, actually running through, building stuff out, doing tests, providing guidance and discussion. So do check us out. So join us then. And of course, we have to thank Nellie. Nellie, thank you so very much for joining us today and for all of your hard work. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope this was useful, and we'll do follow-ups and more sessions on exciting data science features.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Have a great day. Peace. Baker Tilly Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.